The town of Graver's Bend wasn't much to look at. A single dirt road cut through the center like a scar, flanked by weathered storefronts and houses that seemed to lean away from each other, as if even the buildings wanted nothing to do with one another. The wind carried dust and judgment in equal measure, and Clara Vale felt both stinging her face as she walked. Her shoes, what was left of them, had given up miles ago. The soles flapped with each step, letting stones press into her blistered feet. Her dress, once a respectable gray cotton, now hung loose and stained with the kind of dirt that doesn't wash out. She'd tried. Back in the last town, she'd scrubbed it in a creek until her knuckles bled, but poverty has a smell, and no amount of cold water can rinse it away. She kept her head up anyway. The first place she tried was the general store. A bell chimed as she pushed open the door, and the man behind the counter looked up from his ledger. His eyes traveled from her face to her shoes and back again, and his expression closed like a fist. "We don't give handouts," he said before she could speak. "I'm not asking for handouts." Claire's voice came out rougher than she intended. Her throat was dry, her lips cracked. "I'm looking for work. I can clean, cook, mend. Don't need help. Sir, I said we don't need help." He turned back to his ledger, dismissing her like she was a fly that had wandered in by mistake. Clara stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of her own uselessness pressed down on her shoulders. Then she turned and walked out, the bell chiming again, a cheerful sound that mocked her. The next place was a boarding house. A painted sign promised clean rooms, fair prices, but the woman who answered the door took one look at Clara and her expression soured. "You got money?" "I'm looking for work. I could work in exchange for—" "No." The woman started to close the door. Clara put her hand against it, not pushing, just there. "Please, I don't need much. Just a corner somewhere. I can scrub floors, wash linens, anything you—" I said no. The woman's voice dropped to something colder. "We got standards here. This ain't a charity house for people like you." People like you. The words hung in the air like smoke. Clara pulled her hand back and the door slammed shut hard enough to rattle the frame. She walked. The church sat at the end of the main road, a small white building with a crooked steeple that pointed toward heaven like an accusatory finger. Clara had never been particularly religious, but desperation has a way of making believers out of anyone. She climbed the wooden steps and pushed open the heavy door. Inside it was cooler, darker. A few candles flickered near the altar, and the smell of old hymnals and furniture polish filled the air. A man in simple black clothes was arranging flowers near the pulpit. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "Can I help you?" Clara walked down the aisle, her ruined shoes making soft slapping sounds against the floorboards. "I'm looking for work, Reverend, or any kind of help you might be able to offer." The Reverend set down the flowers and studied her. His face wasn't unkind, but it wasn't warm either. He had the look of a man who'd heard too many sob stories and learned to protect himself with distance. "What's your situation?" "I'm widowed, recently. My husband, he left debts. The bank took everything. I've been traveling, looking for work, but where's your family?" "Dead, or might as well be." Clara's jaw tightened. "I'm alone." The Reverend nodded slowly, like he was solving a puzzle he'd seen before. "I see. And you've got no references? No one who can vouch for your character?" "No, sir." He picked up the flowers again, fussing with them. "The thing is, we get a lot of folks passing through here. Drifters. People running from something. The congregation, they're cautious about who we help, especially women traveling alone. There's questions about propriety." Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "I'm not asking for charity, Reverend, just work. I can clean the church, help with—" "We've got volunteers for that." His tone was final. "But I'll pray for you. That's something." Prayers. She was being offered prayers. Clara looked at the altar, at the simple wooden cross hanging above it, and felt a bitter laugh building in her chest. She swallowed it down. "Thank you for your time," she said quietly, and turned to leave. "Wait." She stopped. The Reverend reached into his pocket and pulled out a few coins. He held them out to her, not quite meeting her eyes. "It's not much, but keep it." Clara's voice was flat. "I don't want pity money." She walked out before he could respond. The sun was lower now, painting the dirt road in shades of orange and red that would have been beautiful if Clara had the energy to care. She stood outside the church, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on her like a physical thing. Her feet hurt. Her stomach hurt. Everything hurt. But she wasn't done yet. The mayor's house sat on a small hill overlooking the town, a two-story structure that dwarfed everything around it, painted white with green shutters, and a wraparound porch that screamed wealth and comfort. Clara climbed the hill slowly, each step an effort. A woman answered her knock. She was younger than Clara, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in an elaborate style and a dress that probably cost more than everything Clara had ever owned combined. Her eyes swept over Clara with the kind of clinical assessment usually reserved for livestock. Yes? Ma'am, my name is Clara Vale. I'm looking for work, and I was hoping we have all the staff we need. I'm a hard worker. I can cook, clean, do laundry. I'm sure you can. The woman's smile was thin and sharp. But as I said, we're fully staffed. Perhaps you should try one of the ranches outside town. They're always looking for hands. The way she said hands made it clear what she thought Clara was suited for. Could you recommend any specific? I'm afraid I don't have time for this. The woman started to close the door. Good luck to you. The door clicked shut with a soft, expensive sound. Clara stood on the porch for a moment, staring at the polished wood, at her own warped reflection in the door's glass panel. She looked like a ghost, something already dead that hadn't realized it yet. She descended the hill. By the time she made it back to the main road, the sun was setting in earnest, and the temperature was starting to drop. She could feel people watching her from windows, from doorways. Whispers followed her like stray dogs. Who's that? Don't know. Came through this afternoon begging. Lord, look at the size of her. Probably ate her way through whatever money she had. Shameful, really. Woman that age, no husband, no family. Clara kept walking. She'd learned a long time ago that responding to whispers only made them louder. At the edge of town, she found the barn. It wasn't much. A leaning structure with gaps in the walls wide enough to see through, and a roof that looked like it might collapse if you sneezed too hard. But it was shelter, and that was more than she had anywhere else. Inside, it smelled like animal waste and decay. Old hay rotted in one corner, and something, a rat probably, skittered away when she entered. But there was a relatively dry spot near the back wall, and Clara sank down onto it with a groan that came from somewhere deep in her bones. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and tried not to think about food. She'd eaten when? 2 days ago? A stale biscuit someone had thrown to her like she was a dog. She'd eaten it anyway, too hungry to have pride. The barn door creaked and Clara's head snapped up. A man stood silhouetted against the dying light, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a sheriff's badge that caught the last rays of sun. This is private property, he said. His voice was flat, official. Clara struggled to her feet. I'm sorry, I didn't know. You Clara Vale? She froze. Yes? Word is you've been going door to door all day asking for work. I have. She lifted her chin. Is that illegal? Vagrancy is. He stepped into the barn, and Clara could see his face now. He was maybe 50, with gray streaking his brown hair and lines carved deep around his mouth and eyes. He didn't look cruel, but he didn't look sympathetic either. He looked tired. You got money to pay for a room? No. You got work lined up? Not yet. Then yeah, that's vagrancy. He sighed like this conversation was an inconvenience he hadn't planned for. Look, I'm going to give you 3 days. That's the law. 3 days to find employment or move on. If you're still here after that with no work, I'll have to arrest you. Understand? 3 days. Clara's hands clenched at her sides. I understand. Good. He turned to leave, then paused. There's a pump behind the general store. Water's free if you need it. And you might try the ranches west of here. Town folks got their minds made up, but ranch folks sometimes need help. It was the closest thing to kindness anyone had offered her all day. Thank you, Clara said quietly. He nodded once and left, his boots crunching on the dirt road as he walked away. Clara sank back down onto the hay and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. 3 days. 72 hours to find someone willing to look past her worn clothes and empty pockets and see something worth employing. 72 hours or jail. She pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them, trying to conserve warmth as the temperature continued to drop. Outside, she could hear the town settling in for the night. Doors closing, voices calling out goodbyes, the distant sound of a piano from what was probably a saloon. Normal life. The kind of life that didn't include her. Clara closed her eyes and tried to remember the last time she'd felt like she belonged somewhere. Before her husband died, maybe. before the debts came due and the bank took their little house and everything in it, before she understood that the world was divided into people who had a place and people who didn't, and that crossing from one category to the other was easier than falling off a cliff. She must have dozed off because when she opened her eyes again, it was full dark. Stars poked through the gaps in the roof, and the cold had settled in deep. Clara's teeth chattered, and she rubbed her arms, trying to generate warmth. Her stomach growled, a deep, hollow sound that echoed in the empty barn. She thought about the water pump the sheriff had mentioned. At least she could deal with the thirst, even if the hunger would have to wait. Clara stood, her body protesting every movement, and made her way out of the barn. The town was quiet now, most windows dark. A few oil lamps still burned here and there, casting yellow pools of light onto the dirt road. She found the pump behind the general store, a cast-iron thing with a long handle. She worked it up and down, and after a few squeaky protests, water began to flow. It was cold, shockingly cold, but it was clean, and Clara drank deeply, cupping her hands and bringing the water to her mouth again and again until her stomach sloshed. "You're that woman." Clara spun around, water dripping from her chin. A girl stood a few feet away, maybe 16 or 17, wearing a simple dress and holding a lantern. She had the kind of face that would be pretty if it wasn't currently twisted in disgust. "The one begging all over town," the girl continued. "My mama says you're shameful, says a woman your age ought to have something put by, not be wandering around like what?" Clara's voice was quiet, dangerous. The girl's courage faltered. I don't know, just, it ain't right." "Your mama's probably right about a lot of things," Clara said. "But maybe she didn't teach you that kicking people when they're down makes you smaller, not bigger." The girl's face flushed red, and she turned and hurried away, her lantern bobbing in the darkness. Clara turned back to the pump and splashed water on her face, washing away the day's dust and the sting of 100 small cruelties. When she was done, she stood there for a moment, dripping and cold, looking up at the stars. 3 days, she whispered to no one. "I can do 3 days." She walked back to the barn and settled into her corner again. Sleep came in fits and starts, interrupted by cold and hunger and the sounds of the barn settling around her. But somewhere in the darkest part of the night, Clara made a decision. She wasn't going to jail, and she wasn't going to disappear quietly into whatever hole the town expected her to crawl into. She was going to walk west to those ranches the sheriff mentioned, and she was going to find someone, anyone, willing to give her a chance. Not charity, not pity, just work. Just a chance to prove she was worth something. When the sun rose, Clara was already awake. She'd been awake for hours, listening to the town come to life around her, steeling herself for what came next. She used the last of her energy to make herself as presentable as possible, smoothing her dress, tying back her hair with a piece of string she found in the barn, washing her face and hands at the pump. It wasn't much, but it was something. Then she started walking. West. The road out of Graver's Bend was rutted and dusty, flanked by scrub grass and the occasional stubborn tree. The sun climbed higher, and with it came heat that pressed down on Clara like a hand. Her feet, already blistered and raw, screamed with every step. But she kept walking. The first ranch she came to was a sprawling affair with white fences and a big house that gleamed in the sunlight. Horses grazed in a pasture, their coats shining like copper and gold. Clara walked up the long drive, trying not to limp, trying to look capable. A man was working near the barn, older, with skin like leather and hands that had seen decades of hard work. He looked up as she approached. "Help you?" "I'm looking for work, sir. I can cook, clean, help with... Got all the help I need." He didn't even stop working, just kept hammering at whatever he was fixing. "Try the Morrison place about 5 miles west." 5 miles. Clara nodded and turned back to the road. The Morrison place was smaller, less maintained. The house needed paint, and the fences sagged in places. A woman answered Clara's knock, middle-aged, tired-looking, with flour on her apron. "I'm looking for work," Clara said. "Cooking, cleaning, laundry, anything." The woman looked her up and down. "You got references?" "No, ma'am." "Experience?" "I kept my own house for 15 years. I can..." "Sorry." The woman didn't sound sorry. "Can't hire someone I don't know nothing about. Too risky." The door closed. Clara stood on the porch, swaying slightly. The sun was directly overhead now, beating down without mercy. Her vision swam at the edges, and she realized dimly that she was probably dehydrated. She'd drunk water this morning, but not enough. Not nearly enough for a walk like this. She made it to the end of the drive before her legs buckled. Clara caught herself on a fence post, breathing hard, waiting for the world to stop spinning. Sweat ran down her back, soaking her dress. Her mouth tasted like copper and dust. "You all right?" Clara looked up. A boy, maybe 12, sat on the fence watching her. He had red hair and freckles, and the kind of open, curious expression that hadn't learned to judge yet. "I'm fine," Clara managed. "Just resting." "You don't look fine. You look like you're about to fall over." "I'm fine," she repeated and pushed herself upright. The world tilted dangerously, but she locked her knees and waited it out. The boy hopped down from the fence. "Ma says I'm supposed to offer water to travelers. You want some?" Clara wanted to say no, wanted to maintain some shred of dignity, but dignity wouldn't keep her conscious. "Yes, please." The boy ran to a well near the house and came back with a ladle full of water. Clara drank it in 3 gulps, and he refilled it twice more before she felt steady enough to speak. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome." He studied her with the frankness of children. "You looking for work?" "I am." "We don't need nobody. Ma said so, but maybe the Hale place does. They're kind of a mess since Mrs. Hale died." "Where's the Hale place?" He pointed further west. "Maybe 3 miles. You can't miss it. It's the one with the broken gate." 3 more miles. Clara looked down the road, at the heat shimmering off the dirt, and wondered if she had 3 more miles in her. But what choice did she have? Go back to town and count down the hours until arrest? Sleep in that rotting barn and hope something changed? No, she had to keep moving. "Thank you," she said again, and started walking. The road blurred around her. Clara's feet moved automatically, one in front of the other, while her mind retreated somewhere deep inside where it was cool and dark and nothing hurt. She passed fields and fences, watched cattle grazing in the distance, heard birds calling from trees whose names she didn't know. The sun beat down. Her feet bled. She kept walking. When the broken gate finally came into view, Clara almost cried with relief. The Hale place was small, a simple house with a barn and a few outbuildings, all of it showing signs of neglect. The gate hung at an angle, one hinge broken. Weeds grew tall in what had probably once been a vegetable garden. A chicken coop leaned to one side like a drunk, but there was smoke coming from the chimney, which meant someone was home. Clara walked up the path, past the broken gate, past the weedy garden, and knocked on the door. Nothing. She knocked again, harder. The door opened and a boy stood there, maybe 8 or 9, with dark hair and eyes that were older than they should be. He looked at Clara without expression. "What do you want?" "I'm looking for work." "Is your father home?" "Pa!" the boy yelled over his shoulder. "Someone's here!" Footsteps approached, and then a man appeared behind the boy. He was tall, lean in the way of men who worked hard and ate little. His hair was dark like the boy's, threaded with gray, and his face had the weathered look of someone who spent most of their time outdoors. He wore simple work clothes, stained with dirt and what looked like axle grease. "Can I help you?" His voice was rough, unused to social niceties. Clara straightened her spine, trying to look capable despite the fact that she was swaying on her feet. "My name is Clara Vale. I'm looking for work. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend a garden, help with—" "Don't need help." The words hit her like a slap. Clara felt something inside her crack. "Please." The word came out smaller than she intended. "I don't need much. Just food and a place to sleep. I'm a hard worker, I promise. I said I don't need help." But the man's voice had softened slightly, and he was looking at her with something that might have been concern. "You all right? You don't look—" "I'm fine." Clara tried to sound firm, but her voice shook. "If you could just give me a chance to show you what I can—" "Lady, I can't afford to hire anyone. It's just me and the boys, and we're barely scraping by as it is. I'm sorry, but—" Clara's vision went white at the edges. The last thing she heard before the world tilted sideways was a boy's voice, high and alarmed. "Pa, she's falling." Then darkness. Clara woke to the smell of wood smoke and something cooking. Her head throbbed, and when she tried to sit up, a hand pressed gently against her shoulder. "Easy. You hit your head pretty hard when you went down." She blinked, trying to focus. She was lying on a narrow cot in what looked like a simple kitchen. The man from the door, the one who'd told her he didn't need help, stood over her with a cloth in his hand. Behind him, 2 boys watched with identical expressions of wary curiosity. Twins, Clara realized, both of them dark-haired, both watching her like she might explode. "I'm sorry." Clara said, her voice rough. I didn't mean to. When's the last time you ate? The man interrupted. Clara tried to think. 2 days? Maybe 3. He made a noise in his throat that might have been disgust or sympathy. She couldn't tell which. And you thought it was a good idea to walk how many miles in the heat? I didn't have much choice. He stared at her for a moment, then turned to one of the boys. Finn, get some of that soup. Not too much. Her stomach won't handle it. The boy, Finn, moved to the stove and ladled something into a bowl. It smelled like heaven, like every good thing Clara had forgotten existed. Sit up slow, the man said. You get dizzy. You tell me. Clara pushed herself upright carefully. The room swayed but held steady. Finn brought the bowl over, handling it like it might bite him, and Clara took it with shaking hands. Thank you, she whispered. The first spoonful nearly made her cry. It was just potato soup, nothing fancy, but it was hot, and it was food, and it was the first kindness anyone had shown her that didn't come with conditions or judgment. She ate slowly, aware of all 3 of them watching her. When she was halfway through, the man pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. Name's Rowan Hale, he said. These are my boys, Finn and Ash. Clara nodded to each of them. Clara Vale, and I'm sorry for the trouble. You said you were looking for work. I am. What kind of work you done before? Clara lowered the spoon, choosing her words carefully. I kept house for 15 years. My husband worked at a mill. I did all the cooking, cleaning, preserving, mending, kept a vegetable garden, raised chickens, the usual. What happened to your husband? Died last year, accident at the mill. The words came out flat, practiced. She'd said them so many times they didn't even hurt anymore. He'd borrowed money to buy tools, thinking he'd start his own business. When he died, the debt came due. The bank took everything. Rowan studied her with those dark, measuring eyes. You got family? No. Friends? Anyone who could vouch for you? No. He leaned back in his chair, and Clara could see him calculating, weighing options she couldn't see. One of the twins, Ash, she thought, shifted his weight from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable with having a stranger in their house. I told you before I can't afford to hire anyone, Rowan said finally. Clara set down the bowl. I understand. Thank you for the soup. If you could just point me toward the next ranch, I wasn't finished. His voice was sharp enough that she stopped. I can't afford to hire anyone, but this place is falling apart, as you probably noticed, and I'm not much of a cook. The boys can barely stomach what I make. It ain't that bad, Finn muttered. You told me last week my biscuits could be used as ammunition, Rowan said without looking at him. Well, they could. Despite everything, Clara felt a smile tug at her mouth. Rowan turned back to her. Here's what I can offer. A trial. 1 week. You help around here. Cooking, cleaning, whatever needs doing. I'll give you a place to sleep and 3 meals a day. End of the week, if it's working out, we'll talk about something more permanent. If it's not, you move on. No hard feelings. Clara's heart kicked against her ribs. That's more than fair. I got conditions, of course. You don't touch anything that ain't yours. You don't go poking around in things that don't concern you. And you treat my boys with respect, same as I expect them to treat you. His eyes hardened. You step out of line even once, you're gone. Clear? Clear. Good. He stood up. There's a room off the kitchen. Used to be storage, but we cleared it out when my wife's mother came to visit a few years back. It's small, but it's got a bed and a window. That work for you? Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Boys, show her where it is. I need to get back to fixing that fence before dark. Rowan grabbed his hat from a peg by the door and walked out, leaving Clara alone with the twins. They stared at each other in awkward silence. I'm Finn, the slightly taller one said finally. He's Ash. Nice to meet you both. You really fainted? Ash asked. Just like that? Ash, Finn hissed. What? I'm just asking. It's all right, Clara said. Yes, I really fainted. That's what happens when you're stupid enough to walk all day without eating. Ash seemed to consider this. Our ma used to faint sometimes, before she died. The room went very quiet. I'm sorry, Clara said softly. When did she pass? 1.5 years ago, Finn said. His voice was carefully neutral, the way children sound when they're trying not to feel something. She got sick, took about 3 months. That must have been very hard. Neither boy responded, and Clara realized she'd stumbled into territory that was still too raw to touch. She changed the subject. So, this room, Want to show me? They led her through the kitchen to a narrow door she'd assumed was a pantry. Inside was a small space, maybe 8 feet by 10, with a single bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the overgrown garden. It was sparse, but it was clean, and after sleeping in a rotting barn, it looked like a palace. There's blankets in the chest, Finn said, pointing. And Ma's old... there's some spare clothes in there too, if you need them. Clara looked at him. Are you sure your father would be all right with that? He told us to put them in there, Ash said. Said someone might need them someday. Guess that's you. Clara opened the chest and found 2 dresses, both simple cotton, both well-worn but clean. They'd belonged to someone smaller than her, but they'd fit better than what she was wearing now. Thank you, she said. Really, thank you both. The boys shuffled their feet, clearly uncomfortable with gratitude, and made their escape back to the kitchen. Clara closed the door behind them and sat down on the bed. She'd done it. She'd found a place. Not a permanent one, maybe. Not even a certain one. But for the next week, she had a roof over her head and food in her stomach and a chance to prove she was worth keeping around. Clara put her face in her hands and let herself shake for just a moment, releasing the tension that had been holding her together for days. Then she took a deep breath, straightened her spine, and got to work. The kitchen was a disaster. Not dirty exactly, but chaotic in the way of places where no one's really in charge. Dishes were stacked haphazardly in the basin. The floor needed sweeping. The stove had grease splatters that looked weeks old. The pantry was disorganized, with half-empty sacks of flour and beans shoved in wherever they'd fit. Clara started with the dishes. The pump was outside, so she had to haul water in a bucket, heat it on the stove, and wash everything in a basin. It took 3 trips and most of an hour, but by the time she was done, every dish, pot, and pan in the house was clean and stacked neatly on the shelves. The boys wandered in and out, watching her with the suspicious curiosity of cats. They didn't say much, but Clara caught them exchanging looks when they thought she wasn't paying attention. By the time Rowan came in for supper, the kitchen looked like a different room. The floor was swept, the stove was scrubbed, and something that smelled edible was bubbling in a pot. He stopped in the doorway and just stared. "What's this?" he asked. "Supper. It's just beans and salt pork. You didn't have much in the pantry, but it should be filling." Rowan walked to the stove and peered into the pot like he expected to find something other than food in there. "You did all this today?" "I did the dishes and cleaned the stove. The floor needed sweeping, so I took care of that too. Tomorrow I'll start on the rest." "The rest?" Clara gestured around the kitchen. "The windows need washing. The pantry needs organizing. The stove needs a proper deep clean, not just a wipe down. And I noticed the chicken coop is leaning. I can shore that up if you've got spare lumber." Rowan stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. "You know how to fix a chicken coop? My husband taught me basic carpentry. Nothing fancy, but I can handle simple repairs." "Huh." He sat down at the table, still looking around the kitchen like he didn't quite believe it was real. "Boys, come eat." The twins appeared from wherever they'd been hiding and took their seats. Clara ladled beans into bowls and set them on the table along with a pan of cornbread she'd managed to scrape together from the last of the cornmeal. They ate in silence for a while. Clara picked at her own food, her stomach still adjusting to the idea of regular meals. She watched the others from the corner of her eye, trying to get a sense of the family she'd stumbled into. Rowan ate methodically, his attention on his food. The boys wolfed theirs down like they were afraid it might disappear. Nobody talked. Nobody looked at each other. It was less like a family dinner and more like 4 strangers who happened to be eating in the same room. Finally, Ash spoke up. "This is good." "Yeah," Finn added. "Way better than Pa's cooking." "I heard that," Rowan said mildly. "You were supposed to," Finn shot back, and just for a second there was something lighter in the air, something that might have been humor in a house that remembered how. After supper, Clara washed the dishes again while Rowan sat at the table doing paperwork. Accounts, from the look of it, and not happy ones. The boys disappeared upstairs and Clara could hear them moving around in the room above the kitchen. "You don't have to do all that tonight," Rowan said without looking up from his ledger. "Dishes can wait till morning." "I don't mind. Keeps my hands busy." He made a non-committal sound and went back to his numbers. Clara finished the dishes and wiped down the table around him, careful not to disturb his papers. "I'll need to go into town tomorrow," he said suddenly. "Pick up some supplies. I'll take the boys with me." "All right. You'll be here alone for a few hours. That a problem?" Clara understood what he was really asking. Could he trust her alone in his house? "No problem at all. I'll work on that pantry while you're gone." He nodded and gathered up his papers. We leave at dawn. There's oatmeal in the pantry if you want to make breakfast. I'll have it ready. Rowan paused on his way to the stairs. Clara? She turned. Thank you for today. The words seemed to cost him something, like he wasn't used to saying them. You're welcome. He nodded and disappeared upstairs, his boots heavy on the wooden steps. Clara finished cleaning and retreated to her little room. She changed into one of the dresses from the chest. It was tight across her middle and short in the sleeves, but it was clean and whole, which was more than she could say for her own clothes. She washed her face in the basin and climbed into bed. The mattress was thin and the blanket was rough, but it was a bed. A real bed. Not a barn floor, not a patch of dirt behind a building. A bed. Clara pulled the blanket up to her chin and closed her eyes, listening to the house settle around her. Footsteps overhead, a door closing, the wind moving through the eaves. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. She was asleep before the thought finished forming. Dawn came early. Clara was up before the sun, stoking the fire in the stove and setting water to boil. She found the oatmeal in the pantry along with some dried apples and a precious bit of cinnamon. She cooked the oatmeal slowly, stirring in the apples and spices, and had it ready when she heard movement upstairs. Rowan came down first, followed by the boys. All three of them stopped when they saw the table set with steaming bowls and a pot of coffee. You're up early, Rowan said. Habit. Clara poured coffee into his cup. I figured you'd want to get an early start. They ate quickly, efficiently, and within half an hour Rowan and the boys were loading into a wagon. Clara stood on the porch and watched them go, raising a hand in farewell when Finn looked back. Then she was alone. She stood there for a moment, listening to the silence. No one watching her, no one judging her, no one waiting for her to fail. Just work, honest work. Clara rolled up her sleeves and went back inside. She spent the morning reorganizing the pantry, consolidating partial sacks, throwing out anything that had gone bad, and scrubbing the shelves. By noon, she had a clear inventory of what they had and what they needed. Not much, she realized with a sinking feeling. The pantry was sparse, and some of the staples were running low. She made herself a small lunch from the leftover cornbread and went outside to tackle the chicken coop. It was worse up close than it had looked from a distance. The whole structure leaned to one side and several of the boards were rotting through. But the basic frame was sound, and Clara thought she could shore it up with some bracing. She found tools in the barn, a hammer, some nails, and a few pieces of lumber that looked like they'd been salvaged from something else. It took her most of the afternoon, working slowly in the heat, but eventually she had the coop standing straight again with new support beams holding it in place. The chickens, which had been eyeing her suspiciously the whole time, seemed unimpressed with her efforts. You're welcome, Clara told them, and went to wash up at the pump. She heard the wagon before she saw it, the rattle of wheels and the steady clop of horse hooves. Rowan pulled up to the house and climbed down, the boys jumping from the back. How'd it go? Clara asked. Fine. Rowan started unloading supplies, sacks of flour and beans, some coffee, a bit of salt pork. Town was busy, took longer than I planned. The boys ran into this house, their voices echoing in the sudden emptiness. Rowan handed Clara a sack of flour, and their hands touched briefly. He pulled back like he'd been burned. Sorry, he muttered. It's fine. They unloaded the rest in awkward silence. When everything was inside, Rowan finally looked around and noticed the kitchen. You organized the pantry. I did. Made a list of what you're low on. Clara handed him a piece of paper where she'd written everything in careful script. He studied it, his eyebrows rising. This is thorough. No point doing a job halfway. The coop, Finn said from the doorway. It's standing up straight. She fixed it? Rowan walked to the window and looked out. When he turned back, his expression was unreadable. You didn't have to do that. It needed doing. Still. He set the list down on the table. That's good work. It wasn't much, 3 words, matter of fact. But coming from him, it felt like high praise. Clara felt something warm unfold in her chest. Thank you. Supper that night was better than the night before. Clara had made a proper stew with the fresh vegetables Rowan had brought from town, and there was enough flour now for decent biscuits. The boys ate 3 helpings each, and even Rowan went back for seconds. Did you see anyone interesting in town? Clara asked, trying to make conversation. Rowan shrugged. The usual folks. Picked up supplies at Morrison's store, stopped by the feed shop. Anyone ask about me? He paused, his spoon halfway to his mouth. Why would they ask about you? I went through town a few days ago looking for work. Made something of a spectacle of myself, I think. Morrison mentioned seeing a woman asking for jobs, Rowan said carefully. Didn't connect it to you at first. What'd you tell him? That I'd hired help for the week. Told him to mind his business when he asked questions. Clara felt her shoulders relax slightly. Thank you. Wasn't for you, I just don't like gossip. But there was something in his tone that suggested it might have been a little bit for her, and Clara tucked that knowledge away like a precious thing. The days started to blur together in the best possible way. Clara fell into a routine, up before dawn, breakfast ready when the family came downstairs. Then a full day of work while Rowan handled the ranch and the boys did their chores. Supper at sunset, dishes after, then everyone retreating to their separate spaces. She worked her way through the house like a quiet storm. Windows washed until they gleamed, floors scrubbed, clothes mended, the vegetable garden weeded and coaxed back to something resembling order. She found small repairs everywhere and fixed them without being asked. A loose door hinge, a wobbly chair leg, a tear in a curtain. The boys started to warm to her. Not much, not obviously, but in small ways. Ash started lingering in the kitchen while she cooked, asking questions about what she was making. Finn brought her things he found. A bird's nest that had fallen from a tree, an interesting rock, a wildflower that was actually kind of pretty despite being half dead. Rowan watched it all with those dark, careful eyes, saying little but missing nothing. On the fourth day, Clara was in the garden pulling weeds when she heard shouting from the barn. She straightened up, her back protesting, and saw Rowan storm out with Ash trailing behind him. I don't care if you're tired. The animals need feeding whether you feel like it or not. I said I'd do it later. Later isn't good enough. You do your chores when they need doing, not when it's convenient. Ash's face was red, his hands clenched into fists. You're not the only one who gets to be tired, you know. Maybe if you didn't work us like we're hired hands. You live here. You work here. That's how it works. That's how it worked when Ma was alive. Now it's just work all the time and nobody even talks. And Ash's voice cracked, and he stopped abruptly, looking horrified at himself. Rowan's face went very still. Get your chores done. We'll talk about this later. Forget it. Ash turned and ran toward the house. Rowan stood there for a long moment, his shoulders rigid, before stalking off toward the far pasture. Clara waited, unsure if she should intervene or stay out of it. This was family business, the kind of thing Rowan had specifically told her not to poke into. But then she heard something from inside the house, a sound that might have been crying, quickly muffled. She made her decision. Ash was in the kitchen, his face pressed against his arms on the table, his shoulders shaking. He looked up when Clara came in, and his expression immediately went defensive. I'm fine. Okay? I mean it. I don't need... I said okay. Clara went to the stove and started making tea. You want some? Ash stared at her suspiciously. Tea? Unless you'd prefer coffee. Tea's fine. She made 2 cups and sat down across from him. They drank in silence for a while. He doesn't understand, Ash said finally. Pa, he thinks if we keep working, keep busy, everything will be fine. But it's not fine. No, Clara said quietly. I don't imagine it is. He won't talk about her, about Ma. It's like if we don't say her name, we can pretend it never happened. Ash's hands tightened around his cup. But I don't want to pretend. I just want to remember her without it hurting so much. Clara's throat felt tight. That's normal, you know. Wanting to remember. Yeah, well, Pa doesn't think so. He packed up all her things the month after she died, put them in the attic, said we needed to move forward. People grieve differently. That's not grieving. That's just hiding. Clara couldn't argue with that. She'd seen it herself, the way Rowan moved through the house like a ghost, never quite landing anywhere, never quite at rest, working himself to exhaustion so he didn't have to feel. Give him time, she said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. It's been 1.5 years. Some people need more time than others. Ash looked at her with eyes too old for his face. How long did it take you? After your husband died. Clara took a sip of tea, buying herself time to think. I don't know that I'm done yet. I don't know if you ever really finish grieving someone. You just learn to carry it differently. Does it get easier? Yes and no. The sharp edges wear down, but the empty space doesn't really go away. You just get better at walking around it. Ash nodded slowly like he was filing this information away for later. Pa thinks you're doing a good job. I heard him tell Finn. Clara felt a flush of warmth. Did he? Yeah, said the house hasn't looked this good since Ma was alive. Ash's mouth twisted. He probably shouldn't have said it like that. Probably not. They finished their tea in comfortable silence. When Ash got up to leave, he paused at the door. Thanks for not telling me to just get over it or whatever. I wouldn't do that. I know, that's why I told you. He disappeared outside, presumably to finish his chores, and Clara sat alone in the kitchen feeling like she'd just been trusted with something fragile. That night at supper, Rowan and Ash were carefully polite with each other, the way people are when they've fought and haven't quite figured out how to be normal again. Finn watched them both warily, ready to intervene if things went south. Clara served the meal and ate quietly, staying out of it. Later, after the boys had gone to bed, Rowan lingered in the kitchen while Clara cleaned up. You talked to Ash today, he said. Not a question. I did. He tell you what we fought about? Some of it. Rowan was quiet for a moment. I don't know how to do this. The grief thing. My wife, she was good at the talking, the feelings. I'm better with the doing. There's nothing wrong with that. Feels wrong. Feels like I'm failing them. Clara dried a plate and set it on the shelf. You're keeping them fed and clothed and safe. That's not nothing. It's not enough. Maybe not, but it's what you've got right now. She turned to face him. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing better than you think you are. Rowan met her eyes, and for a moment something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or just the recognition of two people trying their best and falling short in different ways. The week's almost up, he said. Clara's stomach dropped. She'd known this was coming, had been dreading it, but hearing him say it out loud made it real. It is. You've done good work, more than I expected. Thank you. The thing is, he trailed off, looking uncomfortable. The thing is, I still can't pay you much, but if you wanted to stay on, I could offer room and board and a small wage. Not much, maybe $1 a week to start, but yes. The word came out too fast, too eager, but Clara didn't care. Yes, I'll stay. Rowan's shoulders relaxed visibly. Yeah? Yeah. Good. That's good. He cleared his throat, suddenly awkward. I'll draw up something official tomorrow. A proper arrangement. That sounds fine. He nodded and headed for the stairs, then paused. Clara? Yes? I'm glad you didn't leave. The boys, they're doing better. I think maybe having you here helps. He was gone before she could respond, his boots heavy on the stairs. Clara stood in the kitchen, her hands still wet from dishwater, and let herself smile. She'd done it. She'd proven herself. She had a place now, a real place, and maybe, just maybe, she was starting to build something that could last. The arrangement became official on a Tuesday. Rowan had Clara sign a paper that laid out the terms in his careful, blocky handwriting, room, board, $1 a week, with an understanding that the wage might increase if the ranch did better. Clara signed it without hesitation, her own signature looking shaky next to his solid letters. There, Rowan said, folding the paper and tucking it into a drawer. That makes it legal. Legal, Clara repeated, tasting the word. It felt solid, real. The days that followed settled into something that almost felt normal. Clara had stopped thinking of herself as temporary, stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. She started making small improvements without asking first, replanting the garden with fall vegetables, reorganizing the barn so the tools were easier to find, even attempting to teach the boys how to cook simple meals so they wouldn't starve if she got sick. I don't see why we need to know this, Finn complained, watching dubiously as Clara showed him how to make biscuits. You're here now. And what if I'm not here someday? What if I need to go to town and your father wants supper ready when he gets in from the fields? Then we'd just wait for you to get back. Or, Clara said, dumping flour into his hands, you could be useful and learn to feed yourself. Ash snorted from his position at the table, where he was supposed to be peeling potatoes but was mostly just watching. She's got you there. Shut up. Make me. Boys, Clara said without heat, focus. They'd started doing this, the bickering, the teasing, the kind of normal sibling nonsense that meant they felt safe enough to be annoying. Clara had noticed it happening gradually over the past few weeks, the way the house had slowly filled with sound again. Voices, laughter, the ordinary noise of people living together instead of just existing in the same space. Even Rowan seemed different, Not softer exactly, but less rigid. He'd started lingering after supper, sitting at the table with his coffee while Clara cleaned, sometimes talking about the ranch, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. Once, she'd caught him almost smiling when Ash had made a particularly terrible joke, and the sight had stayed with her for days. It felt fragile, this thing they were building, but it felt real. That's why the trouble, when it came, hit so hard. It started with a visit to town. Clara needed fabric to repair the boys' winter clothes, and Rowan had accounts to settle at the feed store. They'd left the boys at home with strict instructions to finish their chores and not burn the house down. That second part was a joke, Rowan had said when he saw Clara's expression. Was it, though? Mostly. They'd taken the wagon in together, and Clara had felt strangely self-conscious sitting next to him on the bench seat, aware of the way people would see them, a man and a woman, arriving together, like they were, well, like they were something they weren't. The feed store went fine. Rowan conducted his business while Clara waited outside, watching the town move around her. It looked different now than it had that first day, less hostile. Or maybe she just felt less desperate, and that changed how everything looked. The fabric shop was a different story. Clara pushed open the door, and the little bell chimed cheerfully. The woman behind the counter looked up, and her smile froze when she saw who'd entered. It was the mayor's wife, the one who'd shut the door in Clara's face all those weeks ago. "Oh," the woman said. "You." Clara kept her expression neutral. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm looking for some sturdy cotton, if you have it. Dark colors preferred." The mayor's wife, Mrs. Brennan, Clara remembered, didn't move to help. "I heard you'd found a position out at the Hale place." "That's right." "Interesting." Mrs. Brennan's eyes traveled over Clara with the same clinical assessment as before, but now there was something else in her gaze, something sharper. "And how exactly did you manage that? Rowan Hale's been turning away help for over a year." "I suppose I came at the right time." Mrs. Brennan finally moved, but instead of getting fabric, she called toward the back room. "Margaret, come out here a moment." Another woman emerged, younger, wearing an expensive dress that marked her as someone's wife or daughter. She took one look at Clara and her eyebrows rose. "This is the woman I was telling you about," Mrs. Brennan said. "The one who came through begging a few weeks back." "I wasn't begging," Clara said quietly. "I was looking for work." "Same difference, really." Mrs. Brennan's smile was thin. "Margaret, this is... I'm sorry, what was your name again?" "Clara Vale." "Right. Clara Vale. She's been staying out at the Hale Ranch, as help, she says." The way she said help made it sound like something dirty. Margaret studied Clara with poorly disguised curiosity. "Really? How long has this been going on?" "About 3 weeks," Clara said, her patience starting to fray. "And I'm still looking for that fabric, if you don't mind." 3 weeks? Mrs. Brennan exchanged a look with Margaret. "That's quite a long time for a temporary arrangement, especially with 2 young boys in the house and no proper chaperone." Clara felt ice settle in her stomach. "I'm hired help. There's nothing improper about it." "Of course not," Mrs. Brennan said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "I'm sure it's all very respectable. Still, people do talk. A woman alone with a widower and his children. It raises questions. Then people should mind their own business." "Oh, honey." Mrs. Brennan's smile turned pitying. "In a town this size, everything is everyone's business. You'd do well to remember that." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to tell this woman exactly where she could put her implications and her judgment, but she needed the fabric, and making a scene would only make things worse. "The cotton," she said through gritted teeth. "Can I see it or not?" Mrs. Brennan took her time selecting several bolts of fabric and laying them on the counter. Clara chose the sturdiest option, paid quickly, and got out of there before her temper got the better of her. Rowan was waiting by the wagon, and he took one look at her face and frowned. "What happened?" "Nothing. Let's go." "Clara." She climbed onto the wagon seat, the fabric bundled in her arms. "Can we just go home, please?" He studied her for a moment longer, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. They rode in silence for the first mile, Clara staring straight ahead, her jaw tight. "Was it Mrs. Brennan?" Rowan asked finally. Clara glanced at him. "You know her?" "Everyone knows her. She runs half the town through gossip and the other half through her husband. What'd she say?" "It doesn't matter." "If it's got you this upset, it matters." Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then, "She implied there was something improper about me living at your house. Said people were talking. Rowan's hands tightened on the reins. Of course she did. She acted like like we were. Clara couldn't finish the sentence. Yeah, I got it. Rowan's voice was flat, angry. That woman's got a talent for making everything sound dirty. Ignore her. Easy for you to say. You're not the one she was looking at like what? Like I'm some kind of opportunist, like I'm taking advantage of your situation. Rowan let out a harsh laugh. Taking advantage? You work from dawn to dark for $1 a week and room and board. If anyone's taking advantage, it's me. That's not how she sees it. I don't care how she sees it. But Clara did. She cared because she'd worked hard to build something stable, and now these women were whispering about it, turning it into something shameful. She cared because whispers had a way of becoming accusations, and accusations had a way of destroying things. The house came into view, and Clara felt some of the tension ease from her shoulders. This was home now. Whatever Mrs. Brennan and her friends wanted to say about it, this was home. The boys came running out when they heard the wagon, and Finn immediately started talking about how Ash had nearly let the chickens escape, and Ash countered that it wasn't his fault the latch was broken, and the normalcy of it helped push away the ugliness of town. That night, Clara lay awake in her small room, listening to the house settle around her. She thought about Mrs. Brennan's pointed questions, about the way Margaret had looked at her like she was a curiosity in a museum. She thought about how quickly acceptance could turn to suspicion when you didn't fit into the boxes people expected. She'd been naive to think finding a place was the end of the struggle. In some ways, it was just the beginning. The whispers reached the ranch 3 days later, in the form of a visitor. Clara was in the garden when she heard a horse approaching. She straightened up, wiping dirt from her hands, and saw a woman dismounting near the house. She was middle-aged, well-dressed, with the kind of posture that came from a lifetime of being in charge. Rowan emerged from the barn, and the woman walked toward him with purpose. "Mr. Hale?" she called out. "I need a word." Clara couldn't hear the response, but she saw Rowan stiffen. The conversation was brief and clearly heated, though kept at a volume that didn't carry. The woman gestured several times, her movements sharp and emphatic. Rowan's responses were shorter, his body language closed off. Finally, the woman mounted her horse and rode away, her back rigid with displeasure. Rowan stood there for a moment, then turned and saw Clara watching. He walked over slowly, his expression dark. "What was that about?" Clara asked. "That was Mrs. Carson. She runs the Women's Temperance Society, or thinks she does. Apparently she's appointed herself spokesperson for the town's moral standards." Clara's stomach sank. What did she want? "To inform me that my living arrangement is causing concern among the respectable families. She suggested it might be better if I found more suitable help." Suitable meaning what? Meaning a man, or at least someone who doesn't give the gossips ammunition. Rowan's jaw was tight. She had the nerve to say it was for the boys' sake, that having an unmarried woman in the house was setting a bad example. "What did you tell her?" "I told her my household arrangements were none of her business, and she could see herself off my property." Despite the situation, Clara felt a flicker of warmth at his bluntness. "I'm sure that went over well. About as well as you'd expect. She said I'd be hearing from other concerned parties." Rowan kicked at a clod of dirt. "I knew this would happen eventually. Small towns and small minds go hand in hand. Maybe I should—" "Don't." His voice was sharp. "Don't you dare say you should leave. You've done nothing wrong. Neither have I. We're not giving these people what they want just because they can't mind their own business. But if it's going to cause problems for you and the boys, let me worry about that." He looked at her, his dark eyes intense. "You want to stay, right? This isn't just a job you're looking to leave the first chance you get?" Clara met his gaze steadily. "No, I want to stay." "Then stay. The rest of them can go to hell." He walked back to the barn, leaving Clara standing in the garden with her heart pounding and her mind racing. She'd thought the hard part was over, but she'd been wrong. The hard part was just beginning. Over the next week, the pressure increased. Rowan came back from town with his jaw set and his mood black. The feed store owner had made pointed comments. The blacksmith had asked uncomfortable questions. Even the minister had stopped Rowan after services to express his concerns. Concerns, Rowan had spat when he got home. Like they give a damn about anything except maintaining their sense of superiority. The boys picked up on the tension. They'd gotten quieter, more watchful, especially when Rowan and Clara talked. Finn had asked once if Clara was leaving, and the fear in his voice had broken her heart. "Not if I can help it," she'd told him. "But what if Pa makes you?" "He won't." But what if the town makes him make you? Clara hadn't had an answer for that. The breaking point came on a Saturday. Rowan had gone to town for supplies, and Clara was teaching the boys how to make pie crust when they heard horses approaching. Multiple horses. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and went to the window. 5 women were dismounting in the yard, all of them dressed in their church finest. She recognized Mrs. Brennan and Mrs. Carson, and the others looked similarly well off and self-important. "Boys, go upstairs," Clara said quietly. "But now." They went, though she could hear them whispering on the landing. Clara took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and opened the door before the women could knock. "Can I help you, ladies?" Mrs. Brennan stepped forward, clearly the designated spokesperson. "We're here to speak with Mr. Hale." "He's not home." "Then we'll wait." "I don't think that's—" "We'll wait inside, if you don't mind." Mrs. Brennan moved toward the door, and Clara had to choose between standing her ground and causing a physical confrontation. She stepped aside, hating herself for it. The women filed into the kitchen, their eyes taking in everything: the clean floors, the organized shelves, the half-made pie on the counter. Clara saw them cataloging it all, looking for evidence of whatever they'd already decided was happening. "You've certainly made yourself at home," Mrs. Carson observed. "I live here," Clara said flatly. "I work here." Yes, about that." Mrs. Brennan settled into a chair without being invited. The others remained standing, forming a kind of wall of judgment. "We've come to discuss your situation, Miss Vale. Or is it Mrs.? "It's Mrs. Vale. I'm widowed." "Recently widowed, we understand. How convenient that you found another household so quickly." Clara's hands clenched at her sides. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "We're not implying anything, dear. We're stating facts. You're an unmarried woman living in the same house as an unmarried man and his 2 impressionable sons. Surely you can see how that looks." "It looks like a housekeeper living where she works." "Does it?" Mrs. Carson's smile was cold. "Or does it look like a woman taking advantage of a lonely widower, playing on his grief to secure herself a comfortable position?" The accusation hit Clara like a slap. "That's not what this is." "No? Then what is it? Because from where we're standing, it looks highly inappropriate. Those poor boys have already lost their mother. They don't need their father's reputation ruined by association with, well, with someone of questionable character." "My character is not questionable, isn't it? You arrived in town with nothing, begging for work. No references, no family, no history. You could be anyone. You could be running from anything." Clara felt rage building in her chest, hot and dangerous. "I'm not running from anything. I lost my husband and my home, and I'm trying to survive. That's all." "By insinuating yourself into a vulnerable family's home." "I was hired to do a job." "Were you?" Mrs. Brennan leaned forward. "Or did you simply refuse to leave until Mr. Hale gave in? We've heard stories about women like you, predators who target lonely men with children who use their feminine wiles to secure a position. That's enough." Clara's voice shook with fury. "You don't know anything about me or this family. You're here because you're bored and mean, and you need someone to look down on to feel better about yourselves." The room went very quiet. Mrs. Carson's face flushed red. "How dare you? How dare I? How dare you come into this house and make accusations about people you don't know? What gives you the right?" "We have a responsibility to this community," Mrs. Brennan said coldly, "to maintain standards of decency and propriety. Your presence here violates both. Then leave. No one invited you here. We'll leave when we're ready." Mrs. Brennan stood up. "But first, let me be very clear. Mr. Hale will be hearing from the town council. We will be recommending that he dismiss you immediately and find more appropriate help. If he refuses, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "The kind that affect his ability to do business in town. The kind that affect his son's standing in the community. The kind that make life very difficult for those who refuse to conform to acceptable standards." It was a threat, a blatant, ugly threat. Clara stared at these women, these respectable, church-going, morally superior women, and saw them for what they really were: bullies. Wielding their social standing like a weapon, destroying what they didn't understand or couldn't control. "Get out," Clara said quietly. "Excuse me?" "Get out of this house. Now." Mrs. Brennan drew herself up. "You have no authority to— This is my home. Get out." For a moment, Clara thought they might refuse, thought she might actually have to physically remove them, which would give them all the ammunition they needed. But something in her face must have convinced them she was serious, because Mrs. Carson touched Mrs. Brennan's arm. "Come on, we've said what we came to say." They filed out, their expressions varying degrees of outraged. Mrs. Brennan paused at the door. "You've made a terrible mistake today, Mrs. Vale. One you'll regret." "The only thing I regret is wasting breath on you." The door closed behind them, and Clara stood there, shaking, listening to them mount their horses and ride away. Footsteps on the stairs made her turn. The boys were standing there, their faces pale. "Are they going to make you leave?" Ash asked. Clara wanted to lie, to reassure them, but she'd never lied to them before, and she wasn't going to start now. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I'm not going without a fight." Finn's eyes were wet. "We don't want you to go." "I know, honey. I don't want to go either." They stood there in awkward silence, none of them knowing what to say. Then Ash crossed the room and hugged her, his thin arms wrapping around her waist. Finn followed a moment later, and Clara held them both, feeling her own eyes burning. "It'll be okay," she whispered, even though she had no idea if that was true. "We'll figure it out." Rowan came home an hour later and knew immediately that something was wrong. The boys were too quiet, and Clara's face was set in hard lines. What happened? Clara told him everything while the boys listened from the table. She didn't soften it or leave anything out. When she finished, Rowan's face was dark with rage. "They came here? To my house? To threaten you?" "They threatened all of us," Clara said. "They're going to the town council. They'll try to force you to fire me." Rowan slammed his hand on the counter, making everyone jump. "Like hell they will." "Rowan, you need to think about this. They can make things difficult for you, for the boys." "I don't care. You should care. This is your life, your business. I'm not worth—" "Don't!" His voice was sharp. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. You're worth more than every one of those hypocrites combined." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. "That's not how they see it." "I don't give a damn how they see it." Rowan looked at his sons. "Boys, do you want Clara to stay?" "Yes," they said in unison. "Even if it means people in town might give you trouble? Might say things?" Finn and Ash looked at each other, then back at their father. "We don't care what they say," Finn said. "We want her to stay." Rowan turned back to Clara. "There's your answer. This is our family, and we decide who's part of it, not them. But the town council can try whatever they want. I'll fight them every step of the way." Clara shook her head. "You don't understand what these people are capable of. They can freeze you out, make it impossible to do business, turn everyone against you. Then let them try." Rowan's jaw was set in a way Clara had learned meant he'd made up his mind and no force on earth would change it. "I'm not losing you because some bored women need someone to persecute." The words hung in the air. "I'm not losing you. Not losing your help, or losing my housekeeper. Losing you." Clara looked at him, at this stubborn, difficult, quietly caring man who'd given her a chance when no one else would. Who'd stood up for her again and again without asking for anything in return. "Okay," she said softly. "If you're sure." "I'm sure." "Then we fight." Rowan nodded, something fierce and determined settling over his features. "Then we fight." The boys cheered, and for just a moment, in the gathering darkness of their kitchen, they felt united, ready. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was still to come. The summons came 2 days later, delivered by a grim-faced deputy who wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. The town council wanted to see Rowan Hale at their next meeting to discuss matters of community concern. The paper didn't mention Clara by name, but everyone knew what it was about. "When is it?" Clara asked, reading over Rowan's shoulder. "Thursday evening, 7 o'clock. He crumpled the paper and threw it on the table. "They want a public spectacle." "Then don't go." "I have to go. If I don't show, they'll say I'm avoiding them, that I know I'm in the wrong." "You're not in the wrong." "Tell that to them." Rowan paced the kitchen like a caged animal. "They'll have the whole town there watching, waiting to see me grovel." Clara watched him move, seeing the tension in every line of his body. "So don't grovel. Go in there and tell them the truth." "Which is?" "That you hired help because you needed it. That I do my job well. That what happens in your home is your business and no one else's." "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. They're the ones making it complicated." Rowan stopped pacing and looked at her. "You know what they're going to say, right? They're going to make it sound like like there's something between us that isn't proper." Clara felt heat rise to her face. "I know." And you're okay with that? With people thinking that about you? I don't care what they think. I care about staying here. With you and the boys. The words came out more raw than she'd intended, and Rowan's expression shifted into something she couldn't quite read. Clara, don't. She held up a hand. Don't say whatever you're about to say. We both know what this is. An employer, an employee. Nothing more. But these boys need stability, and this ranch needs someone who knows what they're doing, and I need a place to be. That's enough reason to fight, isn't it? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Yeah, he said finally. Yeah, it is. The days leading up to Thursday dragged like months. Clara threw herself into work, scrubbing things that were already clean, reorganizing things that were already organized, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. The boys picked up on her anxiety and started hovering, asking questions she couldn't answer. What if they make Pa fire you? Ash asked on Wednesday night while she was mending his shirt. Then I'll find somewhere else. But we don't want you somewhere else. Clara set down her needle and looked at him properly. I know, honey, I don't want to be somewhere else either, but sometimes things don't work out the way we want. That's what Pa said when Ma died, that things don't always work out. The words hit Clara square in the chest. Your Pa's right about that. But you're not dying. You're just leaving because some mean ladies don't like you. I'm not leaving yet, and your father's going to fight to make sure I don't have to. Finn appeared in the doorway, his face troubled. What if fighting makes it worse? What if they get mad and do something bad to Pa? Like what? I don't know. Stop selling to him at the stores. Tell people not to do business with him. They might try that, Clara admitted. But your father's tougher than they think, and so are you two. We're just kids, Ash said quietly. Kids who've survived losing their mother and kept going. That takes strength. Clara picked up her needle again. Whatever happens, you'll be okay. All of you. She wished she believed it as much as she tried to sound like she did. Thursday arrived too fast. Rowan spent the day working himself to exhaustion, coming in for supper covered in dirt and looking like he wanted to put his fist through something. Clara had made his favorite meal, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, but he barely touched it. You need to eat, she said, not hungry. Rowan. He looked up at her, and she saw real fear in his eyes. Not for himself, she realized. For her. For what might happen if he couldn't protect her from this. Eat, she said more gently. You'll need your strength. He ate mechanically, not tasting anything. The boys were silent, pushing food around their plates. The whole meal felt like a wake. When it was time to leave, Rowan put on his good shirt and ran a comb through his hair. Clara helped him with his collar, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. Yeah, I do. I could leave. Just pack up and go tonight. Then there'd be nothing for them to... No. His hand caught hers, stopping her nervous fiddling. We're past that. This is about more than just you staying or going. It's about whether I let these people run my life. Clara looked up at him, at his stubborn jaw and determined eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. Something dangerous and inconvenient, and absolutely not helpful given their current situation. All right, she said, pulling her hand away before she could do something stupid. Then go show them they don't. He left, and Clara was alone with the boys and her churning thoughts. She tried to keep busy, dishes, sweeping, anything, but her mind kept drifting to that meeting hall, to Rowan standing in front of all those people who'd already decided he was wrong. Will he be okay? Finn asked from the doorway. Clara forced a smile. Your father can handle himself. But what if... No what-ifs tonight. Come on, help me finish these dishes. They worked in silence, the three of them moving around each other in the small kitchen. When everything was clean and put away, Clara made them sit at the table. I need to tell you something, she said, in case things don't go well tonight. Don't, Ash said, his voice tight. Listen to me. If your father comes home and says I have to leave, I need you both to understand it's not his fault. He'll be doing what he thinks is best for you. But it's not best for us, Finn protested. We want you here. I know, but sometimes wanting something isn't enough. Clara reached across the table and took each of their hands. You two have given me something I didn't think I'd have again. A place where I matter, where I'm needed. No matter what happens tonight, I'll always be grateful for that. Tears were running down Ash's face. You sound like you're saying goodbye. I'm saying just in case. There's a difference. But she wasn't sure there was. They waited. Clara tried to read, but the words wouldn't stick. The boys pretended to do homework, but mostly just stared at their books. The clock on the mantel ticked away the minutes with agonizing slowness. 8 o'clock came and went. Then 9. Clara's stomach was in knots. At 9:30, they heard the wagon. All three of them rushed to the window, trying to read Rowan's face as he climbed down and unhitched the horse. His expression was unreadable. He came through the door and stopped when he saw them all standing there, waiting. "Well?" Clara said when she couldn't stand the silence anymore. Rowan took off his hat and set it carefully on the table. "That was the longest 2 hours of my life." "What happened?" "They had the whole town there. Had to be 50 people packed into that hall. Mrs. Brennan and Mrs. Carson were in the front row looking like they'd already won." And the council chairman, old Walter Moss, he starts off with this speech about community values and maintaining proper standards, about how certain situations can give rise to improper assumptions, even if nothing improper is actually occurring. Clara's heart sank. "So they're making you fire me." "I'm getting to that." Rowan pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. After Moss finishes his speech, Mrs. Brennan stands up and starts listing all the reasons why my current arrangement is inappropriate. She goes on for a good 10 minutes about unmarried women and moral corruption and setting bad examples for children. "I bet she enjoyed that," Clara said bitterly. "She was having the time of her life. Then when she's done, Moss asks me if I have anything to say in my defense." "What did you say?" Rowan looked at his sons, then at Clara. "I told them the truth. That I hired you because I needed help, and you were the only person who didn't turn tail and run when they saw how much work needed doing. That you've kept this house running and these boys fed and clothed better than I ever could alone. That whatever they think they see happening, they're wrong, and it's none of their business anyway." "How'd they take that?" Finn asked. "About as well as you'd expect. Mrs. Carson stood up and said I was being defensive, which just proved there was something to hide. A few other people chimed in with their concerns. It was turning into a real circus." Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "So what's the verdict?" "I'm getting there. Let me finish." Rowan ran a hand through his hair. It was looking bad, real bad. Moss was starting to talk about community sanctions and making things difficult. Then someone in the back stood up. "Who?" "Tom Morrison. Runs the ranch about 6 miles east. Big guy, keeps to himself mostly." Clara remembered the name, the Morrison place where she'd been turned away that first day. "Tom stands up," Rowan continued, "and he says, 'I got a question for Mrs. Brennan. When my wife died 3 years ago and I had 4 kids to raise alone, did you come out to help? Did any of you?' Mrs. Brennan starts sputtering about how that's different, and Tom just talks right over her. Says, 'Different how? Because I'm a man? Because I had the good sense to hire my wife's sister instead of some stranger? Or is it different because you didn't think you could weaponize it against me?'" "He really said that?" Clara asked. "Word for word. You should have seen Mrs. Brennan's face. She turned purple." Rowan almost smiled at the memory. Then Tom turns to Moss and the council and says, "Rowan Hale's hired help is no different from any other rancher hiring help. You want to police his household, you better be ready to police everyone's, including your own." What happened then? Few other people spoke up. Old Henrik from the feed store said I'd always paid my bills on time and been fair in my dealings. Sarah Chen, who runs the boarding house, said she'd heard nothing but good things about you from folks who'd seen the work you've done on the place. Even Jim from the general store, the same one who turned you away that first day, stood up and said maybe the town had been too quick to judge. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. "I don't understand. Why would they defend me? Most of them don't even know me." "That's what I thought. But then Tom said something that shut the whole thing down. He looked right at Mrs. Brennan and said, 'You want to know what's immoral? Driving a woman who's done nothing wrong out of the only stability she's found. That's what's immoral.'" The room was silent except for the ticking clock. "So they're letting you keep me?" Clara asked carefully. "They don't have a choice. Moss tried to save face by saying they'd be monitoring the situation, but Tom told him to monitor his own damn business and leave mine alone." Rowan leaned back in his chair. "It's not over completely. Mrs. Brennan and her friends are going to keep whispering, but the council can't force me to do anything without looking like hypocrites." Clara sat down slowly, her legs suddenly weak. "We won." "We didn't lose," Rowan corrected. "That's not quite the same thing, but it'll do." Finn and Ash both started talking at once, their relief spilling over into excited chatter. Clara let them celebrate, but she caught Rowan's eye across the table and saw the exhaustion there. He'd fought for her tonight, put himself and his sons at risk of social isolation, all to keep her here. The weight of that gift was almost too much to bear. Later, after the boys had gone to bed still buzzing with excitement, Clara found Rowan sitting on the porch in the dark. She brought him coffee and sat down in the other chair. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You already thanked me." "I don't think I did it right. You stood up for me tonight in a way no one ever has. You risked your standing in this community, your business relationships, everything. Clara, let me finish. You could have taken the easy road, could have let me go and found someone else, someone they'd approve of, but you didn't, and I need you to know that means something, means everything." Rowan stared out at the dark fields. "Those boys in there, they've had enough loss. I wasn't about to let some self-righteous busybodies take away someone else they care about." "Is that the only reason?" The question hung in the air between them. Rowan took a long time to answer. "No," he said finally. "It's not the only reason." Clara's heart beat faster. "Rowan, but it's the reason I'm going to give because the other reasons are complicated and this isn't the time for complicated." He looked at her then, his eyes dark and serious. "You're part of this family now. However that happened, whatever that means, it's true. And I protect what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have bothered her. Instead, it made her feel safer than she had in years. "Okay," she said softly. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking their coffee and watching the stars. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The wind moved through the grass with a sound like whispered secrets. "What happens now?" Clara asked. "Now we keep going, keep working, keep proving them wrong just by existing." Rowan set down his empty cup. "And maybe we start thinking about expanding." "Expanding?" "The ranch. We've been barely scraping by, but with the work you've done getting things organized, I've had time to think about possibilities. There's good grazing land to the north that might come up for sale. If we could increase the herd, bring in more income, that would take capital you don't have. Not if we're smart about it. Cut costs where we can, save what we make, build up slowly." He glanced at her. "I'd need help with the planning, someone who's good with numbers and organization." Clara felt something bloom in her chest. He wasn't just talking about keeping her on as help. He was talking about making her part of the future. "I can do numbers and organization," she said. "I know you can. That's why I'm asking." They stayed out there talking until the cold drove them inside. Rowan showed Clara his rough plans, sketched on the backs of old bills and feed receipts. She asked questions, suggested modifications, pointed out things he hadn't considered. They worked at the kitchen table by lamplight like partners planning a shared future, because that's what they were becoming. The next morning, Clara woke early and started breakfast with a lightness she hadn't felt in weeks. The immediate threat had passed. They had breathing room now. Time to build something real. When Rowan came downstairs, he found her humming while she cooked. He stopped in the doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing. Just, you seem different today." "I feel different. I feel like maybe I can stop waiting for the other shoe to drop." "About time." The boys thundered down the stairs, and the moment passed. They ate breakfast together, making plans for the day. Rowan would check the north pasture to see if the grazing was as good as he remembered. Finn would help him. Ash would stay home and help Clara with the chickens and the garden. It was a normal day. A wonderfully, beautifully normal day. Clara spent the morning teaching Ash the proper way to collect eggs without antagonizing the hens, which turned out to be more complicated than either of them expected. One particularly aggressive bird took exception to their presence and chased Ash around the coop 3 times before Clara managed to shoo it away. "I hate that chicken," Ash declared, breathing hard. "She's just protective of her space. Can't fault her for that." "I can fault her for trying to peck my eyes out." Clara laughed, and the sound surprised her. When was the last time she'd laughed like that? Free and easy, without the weight of fear behind it? They finished the eggs and moved to the garden, where Clara showed Ash how to tell which vegetables were ready for harvest and which needed more time. He was a quick learner when he wasn't being stubborn, and Clara found herself enjoying the teaching. "You're good at this," Ash said, carefully picking beans. "Teaching stuff. You're good at learning when you're not fighting me on it." "I don't fight you that much." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Okay, maybe sometimes. But you don't make me feel stupid when I don't know something. Pa tries, but he gets frustrated when we don't understand right away." "Your father has a lot on his mind. That's not your fault or his." "I know, I just—" Ash trailed off, focusing intently on the beans. "I'm glad you stayed, even if it means those ladies hate us." "They don't hate you. They don't even know you." "That's worse, isn't it? Being hated by people who don't even know you?" Clara stopped what she was doing and looked at this boy who thought too much and felt too deeply. Yeah, she said honestly, it is worse. But it also means their hate doesn't really matter. It's not about you. It's about them needing someone to look down on. That's dumb. Very dumb, but that's people for you. They worked in comfortable silence after that, filling baskets with beans and tomatoes and squash. When Rowan and Finn returned in the late afternoon, they found the kitchen already smelling of supper and Clara teaching Ash how to make biscuits. Those better not be as hard as mine, Rowan said, hanging up his hat. They will be if Ash doesn't stop kneading the dough, Claire said. Gentle, remember? Like you're petting a cat. I've never petted a cat. Then pretend you are. Soft and careful. Ash adjusted his technique, his tongue poking out in concentration. Finn wandered over to watch, and soon both boys were taking turns working the dough under Clara's supervision. Rowan leaned against the counter watching them. Clara caught his eye and smiled. Good ride? She asked. Better than expected. That north grazing is even better than I remembered. If we can swing it, we should definitely expand in that direction. We'll need to run the numbers, see what's realistic. We can do that tonight, after supper. The casual way he said we made Clara's chest tighten. This was really happening. She was really building a life here, putting down roots, becoming part of something. Supper was lively, with the boys competing to tell the most elaborate stories about their respective days. Ash's chicken attack got more dramatic with each retelling, while Finn claimed he'd seen a deer with antlers the size of tree branches. Tree branches? Rowan said skeptically. Big tree branches. Uh-huh. I did. Clara, tell him I don't lie. Clara held up her hands. I wasn't there. Can't testify to the size of any antlers. You're supposed to be on my side. I'm on the side of truth. The boys both groaned, but they were smiling. Even Rowan looked lighter than he had in days, the tension from the town meeting finally easing out of his shoulders. After supper, they cleared the table and Rowan brought out his sketches and notes. Clara fetched paper and a pencil, and they started working through the numbers. If we bought 20 more head, Rowan said, we'd need to account for feed, water, additional fencing, and veterinary care, Clara added, writing it down, plus the cost of the land itself if you're buying, or lease fees if you're renting. Right. So if we figure... He did some quick math in his head. We'd need at least $300 to start, maybe $400 to do it right. Clara looked at the number she'd written. It might as well have been $3,000 for all the chance they had of raising it. We have $47 saved, Rowan said quietly. Took me 2 years to save that much. So we save more. Cut costs where we can, set aside every extra penny. At this rate, it'll take years. Then it takes years. Rome wasn't built in a day. Rowan looked at her. You really think we can do this? I think we can try. That's all anyone can do, right? Try and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, then we try something else. Clara tapped the paper with her pencil. But first we need a real budget. Account for everything we spend, find places to trim. I can handle that if you want. You want to manage the household accounts? Someone should, and I'm good with numbers, unless you'd rather... No, you do it. That'd be helpful, actually. They kept working, Clara making lists and calculations while Rowan provided information about costs and income. It wasn't glamorous work, but it felt important, like they were building a foundation for something real. The boys had disappeared upstairs, and the house was quiet except for the scratch of Clara's pencil and the occasional comment from Rowan. At some point, he'd moved his chair closer so he could see what she was writing, and now they were sitting side by side, their shoulders almost touching. Clara was acutely aware of his presence, the warmth of him, the smell of soap and horses and leather. She kept her focus on the numbers, trying not to think about how easy it would be to lean into him, to close that small gap between them. We should also think about repairs, she said, her voice slightly unsteady. The barn roof needs work before winter, and the fence along the east pasture is about to fall down. Add it to the list. She wrote it down, and their hands brushed as Rowan reached for a different paper. They both froze for a heartbeat, then pulled back like they'd been burned. Sorry, Rowan muttered. It's fine. But the air between them felt charged now, heavy with things neither of them was ready to name. Clara cleared her throat and focused on the numbers with renewed intensity. They worked for another hour, building a budget that was realistic, if not exactly optimistic. By the time they finished, Clara's hand was cramped from writing and her eyes were tired from the dim lamplight. This is good, Rowan said, reviewing her final calculations. Really good. If we stick to this, we might actually pull it off. If we're careful and nothing unexpected happens. When does life ever work that way? Fair point. Rowan gathered up the papers and put them in a safe spot. Thank you for this, for taking it seriously. Why wouldn't I take it seriously? This is my future too. The words hung between them, carrying more weight than Clara had intended. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Yeah, he said quietly. It is. Clara stood up, suddenly needing distance before she said or did something she couldn't take back. I should get to bed. It's late. Clara. She stopped at the doorway to her room. What happened tonight? At the meeting? Tom Morrison standing up like that? The others speaking for you? That doesn't happen for just anyone. People saw something in you worth defending, worth fighting for. Clara's throat felt tight. I think they saw a man willing to fight for what he believed in. They respected that. Maybe. But the point stands. You've made a place for yourself here that no one can take away now. Not Mrs. Brennan, not the council, not anyone. I hope you're right. I am. And tomorrow we're going to prove it by getting back to work and building something better. Clara smiled despite her exhaustion. Tomorrow, then. She retreated to her small room and closed the door, leaning against it in the darkness. Her heart was racing, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. The town meeting, Rowan's defense of her, their planning for the future. Those moments when they'd sat too close and the air had felt electric. This was dangerous territory, getting attached to this place, these people, letting herself hope for something more than just survival. But it was too late to protect herself now. She'd already fallen. The question was what she was going to do about it. The answer to what Clara was going to do about her feelings came gradually, in the smallest of moments scattered across the weeks that followed. It came when Rowan started teaching her how to read the land, standing beside her in the north pasture and pointing out which grasses were good for cattle and which weren't worth the space they took up. He'd stand close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him in the cool morning air, his voice low and patient as he explained things he'd learned over decades. See that bluegrass there? That's what you want. Nutritious, hardy, comes back year after year. But that stuff over there, the tall fescue, it's practically worthless, fills their bellies but doesn't put weight on them. Clara listened and learned and tried not to think about how natural it felt to stand beside him like this, looking at the future they were building together. It came when she found him in the barn one evening, teaching Finn how to properly saddle a horse. The patience he showed his son, the way he corrected without criticizing, demonstrated without belittling, made her chest ache. This was a good man, a man who'd been dealt hard losses and kept going anyway, kept trying to do right by his boys even when he wasn't sure how. It came in the way Ash started seeking her out, when something bothered him, the way Finn would show her things he found interesting, the way both boys had stopped treating her like a temporary fixture and started treating her like she belonged. But mostly, it came in the late evenings when she and Rowan would sit at the kitchen table going over accounts and plans, their heads bent together over papers and numbers, building something neither of them had names for yet. 3 weeks after the town meeting, Clara was in the garden when she heard a wagon approaching. She looked up, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun, and saw an unfamiliar rig pulling into the yard. A woman climbed down, younger than Clara, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. She had the look of someone who worked outdoors, with sun-weathered skin and capable hands. "Help you?" Clara called out, wiping dirt from her hands. "You Clara Vale?" "I am." The woman walked over, her stride confident. "I'm Rachel Morrison. Tom's my husband." Clara recognized the name immediately. The man who'd stood up for Rowan at the town meeting. "Nice to meet you. Tom told me what happened at that meeting, told me what those women tried to do to you." Rachel's expression was somewhere between sympathetic and angry. "I wanted to come by and say I'm sorry you had to go through that, and that if you ever need anything, someone to talk to, help with canning, whatever, you just come by our place." Clara felt her throat tighten. "That's kind of you." "It's not kind. It's decent. There's a difference." Rachel glanced around at the garden, taking in the neat rows and healthy plants. "This looks good. You do all this yourself?" "With some help from the boys. Tom said you fixed up the whole place, said it was falling apart before you got here." "It needed work. Still does." Rachel smiled. "I like you. You don't brag or make excuses. Tom said you were the straightforward type." She reached into her wagon and pulled out a basket covered with a cloth. "Brought you some preserves. Figured you might not have had time to put up much yet." Clara took the basket, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just know you've got friends out here if you need them. The town gossips don't speak for all of us. After Rachel left, Clara stood in the yard holding the basket and feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not just gratitude, but connection. The knowledge that she wasn't alone in this fight, that there were people who saw her as more than a scandal or a threat. When Rowan came in that evening, she told him about the visit. Tom's wife came by, brought preserves and an offer of friendship. Rowan's expression softened. That's good. Rachel's solid people. If she's on your side, others will follow. I don't need others to follow. I just need to not be actively hated. You were never hated, feared, maybe, judged, but not hated. What's the difference? Hate is personal. What those women did at the meeting, that wasn't personal. They didn't know you well enough to hate you. They just saw someone who didn't fit their idea of how things should be, and they tried to remove the inconvenience. Clara thought about that. I'm not sure that's better. It's not. But it means you didn't do anything wrong. You just existed in a way that made them uncomfortable. Story of my life. Rowan smiled, that rare, soft expression that transformed his whole face. Mine too. The weeks rolled into months. Fall arrived with cooler temperatures and changing leaves, and Clara threw herself into preparing for winter. She canned everything the garden produced, stored root vegetables in the cellar, made sure the boys had warm clothes that actually fit. The house had never been more ready for cold weather. The budget she'd created was working. They weren't getting rich, but they were stable, even managing to save a little. Rowan had stopped looking stressed every time a bill came due, and that alone felt like a victory. The boys were thriving. Finn had shot up 2 inches and needed new pants every other month. Ash had started reading books Clara borrowed from Rachel Morrison, losing himself in stories of adventure and distant places. Both of them had stopped having that pinched, anxious look they'd worn when Clara first arrived. And Rowan was changing too. Still quiet, still reserved, but there was a lightness to him now that hadn't been there before. He smiled more, laughed occasionally at the boys' jokes, even made a few of his own. One evening in late October, Clara was making supper when she realized Finn was watching her with an odd expression. What? She asked. Nothing. Just, you hum when you cook now. You didn't used to do that. Clara hadn't noticed, but he was right. Somewhere along the way, she'd stopped just surviving and started living. The difference showed in small things, humming while she cooked, taking time to watch the sunset, actually tasting her food instead of just eating it for fuel. I guess I do, she said. It's nice. Ma used to hum too. The comparison could have been painful, but instead it felt like acceptance. Like Finn was saying she'd earned her place in the space his mother had left. Your mother had good taste in songs then, Clara said lightly. Finn grinned and went back to setting the table. That night, after the boys had gone to bed, Rowan asked Clara to take a walk with him. They'd done this a few times now, walking the property line in the cool evening air, talking about plans and problems and nothing in particular. Tonight felt different, though. Rowan was quieter than usual, his hands shoved in his pockets, his gaze on the ground. Something on your mind? Clara asked when the silence stretched too long. Always. Question is whether to say it out loud. When has keeping quiet ever helped anything? He huffed out a laugh. Fair point. They walked a bit further before he spoke again. The boys asked me something last week. Been chewing on it ever since. What'd they ask? If you were going to stay forever. Clara's heart stuttered. What did you tell them? That I didn't know. That it was up to you. He stopped walking and turned to face her. But the thing is, I want to know too. What your plans are. If this is just temporary until something better comes along, or if you're thinking long-term. I'm thinking long-term, Clara said quietly. I thought I'd made that clear. You've made it clear you're committed to the work. That's not the same thing as being committed to this, to us. The word hung between them. Us. Not the ranch, not the job, us. Clara's mouth was dry. What are you asking me, Rowan? I'm asking if you're happy here. If this is enough for you, because if it's not, if you're going to leave eventually anyway, I need to know now. Before the boys get more attached. He stopped abruptly. Before you what? He looked at her, and in the moonlight his eyes were dark and intense. Before I make a fool of myself. Clara's heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. You're not making a fool of yourself. No? No. She took a breath, committing to the truth. I'm happy here. Happier than I've been in years. Maybe ever. This place, these boys, you, it's become home. And I don't want to leave. Not now, not ever, if I can help it. Rowan let out a breath like he'd been holding it for weeks. Okay. 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 He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid. I'm not good with words, never have been. But I need you to know that you're not just help to me. Haven't been for a while now. What am I then? Family, partner, someone I trust with my sons and my home and my future. He squeezed her hand. Someone I care about more than I probably should, given that you work for me and there's propriety to consider and... Clara stopped him by stepping closer, close enough that she could feel his breath on her face. Stop worrying about propriety. Those women at the meeting already decided we were improper. Might as well earn it. Clara, I care about you too, more than I should, more than is smart. But I'm tired of being smart and careful and worried about what people think. Rowan's free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. You sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she might break. Clara leaned into him, letting herself feel what she'd been holding back for months. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Well, Rowan said, his voice rough. That complicates things. Does it? Yeah, because now I have to figure out how to make this right, make it proper. I don't care about proper. I do. For your sake and the boys. He pulled back slightly, though he didn't let go of her hand. People are already talking. If we just carry on like this without making it official, it'll get worse. Clara's stomach dropped. Official how? However you'll have me. But I was thinking marriage, if you're willing. The word hit her like a physical blow. Marriage. Too fast? Rowan looked worried now. I know we haven't been... this just happened, but I've been thinking about it for a while. And it makes sense, doesn't it? You're already part of the family, already running the household. The boys love you. He stopped. You what? I love you too. Didn't plan on it, didn't want it, but there it is. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. You can't just say things like that. Why not? It's true. Because I've spent so long not having anything that when someone offers me everything, I don't know what to do with it. Rowan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. You don't have to do anything. Just say yes or no. Everything else we'll figure out together. Clara pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the smell of him, soap and leather and wood smoke. This man who'd given her a chance when no one else would, who'd fought for her, stood up for her, made space for her in his life and his heart. Yes, she whispered. Yeah? Yeah. She pulled back to look at him. But I want to be clear about something. I'm not marrying you because it's proper or convenient or the best solution to a scandal. I'm marrying you because I love you and those boys and this life we're building. Understood? Rowan smiled, really smiled, and Clara felt like the sun had come out. Understood. They walked back to the house hand in hand, both of them quiet but content. Tomorrow they'd figure out the details, when, how, what to tell the boys. Tonight it was enough just to know they'd chosen each other. The boys took the news better than Clara expected. Finn whooped and immediately started planning where they should have the ceremony, while Ash just smiled and said he'd known it was going to happen eventually. How'd you know? Rowan asked. Because you look at her the way you used to look at Ma, like she's the best thing you've ever seen. Rowan cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the observation. Well, glad we have your approval. You didn't need it, Ash said, but you have it anyway. They decided to keep it simple. No big ceremony, no fuss. Just a quick trip to the county clerk with the boys as witnesses, then a nice supper at home. Clara didn't need a white dress or flowers or any of the trappings. She just needed it to be real and legal and permanent. The morning of the wedding, Clara stood in her small room, soon to be their room, a thought that still made her dizzy, and looked at herself in the small mirror. She wore the better of the two dresses from the chest, the one that fit a bit looser. Her hair was pulled back simply. No special preparation, no elaborate styling. She looked like herself. That would have to be enough. Rachel Morrison had sent over a bouquet of late-season flowers with a note that said, "Congratulations, you deserve this." Clara held them carefully, touched by the gesture. The boys knocked on her door, both of them scrubbed clean and wearing their good shirts. "Pa says it's time to go," Finn announced. "You look nice," Ash added. Clara smiled. "So do you both." Very handsome. They rode into town together, the four of them in the wagon. Clara's hands were shaking slightly, but Rowan reached over and squeezed one of them, steady and reassuring. The county clerk's office was a small building near the courthouse. They walked in together, and the clerk looked up from his desk with raised eyebrows. "Mr. Hale, wasn't expecting to see you today. Need to file some paperwork," Rowan said. "Marriage license." The clerk's eyebrows climbed higher. "Marriage license, I see." He glanced at Clara, recognition dawning. "This the woman from the council meeting?" "This is Clara Vale, soon to be Clara Hale." The clerk studied them for a moment, and Clara braced herself for judgment or commentary. Instead, he just pulled out the necessary forms. "All right then, let's make it official." The ceremony was brief and businesslike. They signed papers, answered questions, exchanged simple vows. The clerk pronounced them married with all the enthusiasm of someone processing a grain delivery permit. But when Rowan kissed her, quick and almost shy with the boys and the clerk watching, it felt real anyway. They were married. Outside, Finn was bouncing on his toes with excitement. "Can we tell people now?" "Tell who?" Rowan asked. "Everyone. Mrs. Morrison, the people at the feed store, everyone." "How about we tell people as we meet them, instead of making announcements?" "That's boring." "That's practical." They stopped at the general store on the way out of town. Jim, the owner who'd turned Clara away that first day, looked up when they entered. "Afternoon, Rowan. Ma'am." He nodded at Clara, polite but distant. "Afternoon, Jim. Need to settle my account and pick up a few things." "Sure thing." Jim pulled out the ledger. "That'll be $7.30. Rowan paid, and Jim made the notation. As they were leaving, Finn couldn't contain himself anymore. "Mr. Jim, did you know Clara's our ma now? They got married this morning." Jim's hand froze mid-motion. He looked from Finn to Clara to Rowan, his expression unreadable. "That's so." "It is," Rowan said calmly. "Well," Jim set down his pen. "Congratulations, then. That's good news." It wasn't enthusiastic, but it wasn't hostile either. Clara would take it. They made it home by mid-afternoon, and Clara started preparing the special supper she'd planned. Rowan hovered in the kitchen, clearly unsure what to do with himself now that everything had changed and also hadn't. "You're in my way," Clara said, but she was smiling. "It's my kitchen." "It's our kitchen now, and I'm cooking, so either help or move." He moved, settling at the table to watch her work. The boys were outside doing chores, giving them a rare moment of privacy. "You nervous?" Rowan asked. "About what?" "Tonight, about everything changing." Clara thought about it. "No. Should I be?" "I don't know. Seems like a big change." "Not really. I was already living here, already part of the family. Now it's just legal." She paused. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified." The honesty of it made Clara turn to look at him. "Why?" "Because my first marriage. I love my wife, but we had years to build up to it. Courting, engagement, all that normal progression. This is different, faster, and I keep thinking I'm going to mess it up somehow." Clara wiped her hands and crossed to him, putting her hands on his shoulders. "You're not going to mess it up. We're both going to make mistakes and have arguments and probably drive each other crazy sometimes. That's what people do. But we'll figure it out together. You sound very sure about that." "I'm sure about you, about us. That's enough." Rowan pulled her down onto his lap, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I don't deserve you." "Good thing it's not about deserving then. It's about choosing. And I choose you." He kissed her properly then, without boys or clerks watching, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. This was right. All of it. The ranch, the boys, this man who'd taken a chance on her when she had nothing to offer but desperation and determination. The boys came back in eventually, and they all sat down to supper together. It was good food, nothing fancy, but it tasted better than anything Clara could remember eating. Maybe because she was eating it with her family. Her real, legal, permanent family. After the dishes were done and the boys had reluctantly gone to bed, Clara and Rowan sat on the porch in the cooling night air. "Think the town will make trouble about this?" Clara asked. "Probably. Mrs. Brennan's not going to like that she didn't get her way." "Let her dislike it. We're legal now, respectable, everything they claim to want. They'll find something else to complain about. That's what people like her do." "Then let them complain." Clara leaned against him. "I'm tired of caring what they think." "Good, because I plan to give them plenty more to talk about." Oh? Rowan's hand found hers in the darkness. Figure once we get that North Pasture expansion going, and the house additions built, and maybe a couple more kids added to the family, they'll have enough scandal to keep them busy for years. Clara's breath caught. Kids? You want more kids? Wouldn't mind, if you're willing. No pressure, though. The boys are enough if that's all you want. Clara thought about it, about a baby of their own, about watching Rowan be a father to someone from the very beginning, about expanding this fragile, beautiful thing they'd built. It scared her, but the good kind of scared, the kind that came with possibility instead of dread. I'm willing, she said quietly. Yeah? Yeah. They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Clara thought about how far she'd come from that first day in Graver's Bend, desperate and alone with nowhere left to go. How close she'd come to giving up, to letting the weight of rejection crush her. What are you thinking about? Rowan asked. About that first day I showed up here, when you said you didn't need help, and I fainted on your porch. That was a hell of an introduction. I was so sure you'd send me away, so sure that was the end. Almost did. You looked half dead, and I didn't need the complication. Rowan's arm tightened around her. Thank the stars I'm too stubborn to make the smart choice. The smart choice? Smart would have been sending you on your way, avoiding all the trouble. But I looked at those boys standing there, and I looked at you trying so hard to stay conscious, and I thought, maybe just a trial, just to see. Best decision you ever made? Top 3, easily. Clara elbowed him. Top 3. What beats it? Marrying my first wife. She gave me the boys. And marrying you, though that one might edge into first place if you keep being this nice to me. I'm always nice to you. You make me eat vegetables and tell me when I'm being stupid. That's not nice, that's necessary. Clara laughed, and the sound carried across the dark fields. She'd laughed more in the past few months than in the previous few years combined. That had to mean something. I should probably move my things, she said eventually. From that little room to wherever I'm sleeping now. Our room, which needs work, honestly. It's pretty bare. We can fix it up however you want. I don't need much. I know, but you should have it anyway. They stayed out there until the cold drove them inside. Rowan showed Clara the main bedroom, his bedroom, that she'd never been in before. It was sparse, like he'd said. A bed, a dresser, a washstand. Nothing personal, nothing that spoke of the man who slept there. We'll make it ours, Clara said. Yeah, we will. That first night sleeping beside him was awkward in the way new things are. They were both too aware of each other, too careful, trying to figure out how to share space they'd each had to themselves for so long. But eventually, they settled into a comfortable position, Clara's head on Rowan's chest, his arm around her shoulders. This okay? He asked. More than okay. She fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat, steady and sure, and didn't wake once through the night. The next morning, Clara woke to find Rowan already up and the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. She dressed quickly and went to investigate. Rowan was at the stove, attempting to make breakfast. Attempting being the key word. The eggs were burned, and the bacon was somehow both crispy and raw. What are you doing? Clara asked. Making breakfast. Figured on our first morning as a married couple, you shouldn't have to cook. That's sweet, but you're making a mess. I know, but I'm trying. Clara crossed to him and kissed his cheek. Let me help. They cooked together, salvaging what they could of his efforts and starting fresh on the rest. The boys came down to the smell of food and immediately started pestering them with questions about what married people did that was different from unmarried people. Nothing you need to worry about, Rowan said firmly, but nothing. Finn and Ash exchanged looks but dropped it, turning their attention to breakfast instead. It was a normal morning, perfectly, wonderfully normal. And Clara realized that was the miracle of it, not some grand transformation, but the simple comfort of normal, of belonging, of home. The weeks that followed brought more of the same. News of the marriage spread through town, generating exactly the gossip Rowan had predicted. Some people were supportive, like Rachel Morrison and a few others. Some were scandalized. Most just found it moderately interesting before moving on to the next piece of news. Mrs. Brennan and Mrs. Carson pointedly ignored Clara when their paths crossed in town, but Clara found she didn't care. Their opinion had stopped mattering the day she and Rowan said their vows. Winter came in hard, with snow that piled up past the windows and temperatures that made going outside an ordeal. But the house was ready for it, warm and well-stocked, and the family settled into the cozy rhythm of winter on the ranch. Clara taught the boys to read better, working with them at the kitchen table while Rowan handled repairs in the barn. She and Rowan planned for spring, talking about seeds to order and improvements to make, and how to manage the expansion they were saving for. One night in late February, Clara was helping Finn with arithmetic when she realized something had shifted. She wasn't thinking about the future with anxiety anymore, wasn't waiting for disaster to strike or for someone to take it all away. She was just living, planning and hoping and building like someone who had every right to a future. "You okay?" Finn asked, noticing her distraction. "Yeah, just thinking about how different things are now." "Different good or different bad?" "Different good." "Very good." Finn smiled and went back to his numbers, and Clara sat there feeling grateful for all of it, the hard work, the struggle, the fear, because it had all led here, to this warm kitchen with these boys and this life that was hers. Spring brought new challenges and new opportunities. The land they'd been eyeing came up for sale, and after long discussions and careful calculations, they decided to take the risk. It would stretch their finances thin, but it was an investment in the future they were building. The day they signed the papers, Rowan came home with a strange expression on his face. "What happened?" Clara asked. "Ran into Tom Morrison in town. He said something I can't stop thinking about." "What'd he say?" "That watching us build this life together reminded him why he does what he does. Why he works the land and raises his kids out here instead of moving somewhere easier. Because sometimes the hardest things are the ones most worth doing." Clara felt her throat tighten. "He's right. Yeah. And I started thinking about that first day you showed up here. How easy it would have been to send you away. How close I came to making that choice." "But you didn't." "But I didn't. And now I can't imagine this life without you in it. Can't remember what it was like before you came." Clara crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Good. Because you're stuck with me now. Best kind of stuck." Summer arrived, and with it came the work of expanding the herd and managing the new land. It was exhausting, demanding every bit of energy they had. But they did it together, Clara keeping the books and managing the household while Rowan handled the physical labor, both of them making decisions as partners. The boys grew and changed, shooting up like weeds and eating everything in sight. They'd stopped asking if Clara was going to leave, stopped treating every day like it might be the last. They just lived, secure in the knowledge that their family was solid. One afternoon in late August, Clara was in the garden when a familiar wagon pulled up. Rachel Morrison climbed down, her face serious. "Rachel, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but I thought you should know. Mrs. Brennan passed away last week. Heart gave out." Clara felt a complicated mix of emotions. She'd never wished the woman harm, despite everything. "I'm sorry to hear that. I'm not asking you to mourn her, but I wanted you to know because Mrs. Carson is hosting a memorial tea tomorrow. She specifically asked me to invite you." "Why would she invite me? She hates me." "Maybe she did, but things change. People change." Rachel handed her an envelope. "Just think about it." After Rachel left, Clara opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten invitation to the memorial tea, and at the bottom, a note in shaky script. "It would mean a great deal if you could attend. We have not always been kind. Perhaps it is time to remedy that." Clara showed it to Rowan that evening. "You don't have to go," he said immediately. "I know, but maybe I should. Maybe it's time to let some things go. You're a better person than me." "No, just tired of carrying grudges. They're heavy." The next day, Clara put on her best dress and made the trip to town. The tea was held in Mrs. Carson's parlor, filled with the same women who'd tried to drive her away months ago. When Clara entered, the room went quiet. Mrs. Carson rose from her chair and crossed to greet her. "Mrs. Hale, thank you for coming." The formal use of her married name was deliberate, Clara realized, an acknowledgement of what these women had tried to deny. "Thank you for inviting me. Please sit. I'll get you some tea." The afternoon was awkward at first, full of stilted conversation and careful politeness, but gradually something shifted. Margaret, the younger woman from the fabric shop, asked Clara about the ranch. Another woman inquired about the boys. They were small overtures, tentative, but they were something. Mrs. Carson pulled Clara aside before she left. "I owe you an apology," the older woman said quietly. "What we did to you at that town meeting was cruel and unfair. We were frightened of change, of things we didn't understand, and we took it out on you. I appreciate you saying that. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that some of us have recognized our error. You've proven yourself to be exactly what you claimed, A good woman doing honest work and caring for a family that needed you. There's no shame in that. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a willingness to move forward. Thank you, Mrs. Carson. That means more than you know. Driving home, Clara thought about how much had changed, how she'd gone from being the woman no one wanted to someone who belonged. Not because she'd changed who she was, but because she'd refused to let their rejection define her. She'd built a life on her own terms, with people who chose her and whom she chose in return. That was worth more than any acceptance from people who judged her unfairly. When she got home, Rowan and the boys were waiting on the porch. "How'd it go?" Rowan asked. "Better than expected," Mrs. Carson apologized. "Really?" "Really. I think they're trying to make amends, in their own way." "You going to let them?" Clara thought about it. "I'm going to let it go. That's not quite the same thing, but it's enough." That evening, sitting at the dinner table with her family around her, Clara felt something she'd been chasing her whole life without knowing it. Not happiness, exactly, though she was happy. Not contentment, though she was content. Peace. The deep, settled peace of someone who'd found where they belonged. "What's that smile for?" Ash asked. "Just thinking about how lucky I am." "We're the lucky ones," Finn said. "You could have gone anywhere. Could have found some rich family in a big city, but you stayed here with us." Clara looked at each of them, Finn with his earnest face, Ash with his two old eyes, Rowan with his quiet strength. Her family. Hard-won and chosen and real. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Months turned into years, and the ranch prospered. The expansion worked, the herd grew, the house filled with new sounds, eventually including the cries of a baby girl they named Hope, and 2 years later, twin boys who kept everyone on their toes. The boys grew up and started their own lives, but they never strayed far. Finn took over more of the ranch work as Rowan got older. Ash became a teacher in town, passing on the love of learning Clara had instilled in him. And Clara became exactly what she'd always had the potential to be. Not just a housekeeper or a wife or a mother, but a woman who built something from nothing, who took rejection and turned it into resilience, who found family in the unlikeliest of places and held on to it with both hands. Sometimes on quiet evenings, she'd sit on the porch with Rowan and think about that first desperate walk across the valley, about the doors that slammed in her face and the judgment that followed her everywhere, about the moment she'd almost given up. "What are you thinking about?" Rowan would ask, like he always did. And Clara would say, "About how far we've come, about how close I came to missing all this." "But you didn't miss it. You're here." "I'm here," she'd agree, and feel the truth of it settle in her bones. Because she was here. She'd survived the rejection, fought through the judgment, and built a life that no one could take away. Not through luck or chance, but through sheer determination and the willingness to keep going when everything said to give up. That was the lesson Clara carried with her, the one she passed down to her children and eventually her grandchildren, that your worth isn't determined by who accepts you or who turns you away. It's determined by what you do with the space you're given, by how you build when everyone says you'll fail, by how you choose to show up even when the world says you don't belong. Clara had shown up. She'd done the work. She'd loved hard and fought harder. And in the end, she hadn't just found a place in the world, she'd created one. And that made all the difference.